A very good morning to all of you from Montecassino battlefield tours. Danila speaking today, again about the 34 divisions for other interesting stories. Since 2005, I've been leading tours for veterans and their relatives, organizing individual tours, personalizing their experience. I had the rare privilege to hear their voices, to listen to their stories. Now my duty is to pass over what I learned. The first story I want to tell you, it's about Private First Class Herman A. Bullard. I met his son, Duan, in September 2019. His father wrote notes about his wartime, made sketches because he was a very talented artist. I want you to listen to Duan while reading the notes of his father during the battlefield with me in September.
To the front lines, we were beginning to realize what we were up against because there were dead soldiers lying on either side of us. We also began to realize, after what we thought was a long, weary, and miserable journey, that what we had experienced previously was heaven compared with what we were experiencing now in all the rain, mud, sleet, and snow. I can't tell you about what it was like the next few days, but you can get an idea from the following look in pictures. This is a brief sketch of my combat experience. I joined my outfit for my first combat between Mount Portia and Mount Trocchio, and joined in the house-to-house fighting at San Vittore. We moved on down to the hill guarding Mount Trocchio. It took us 3 days here, and Mount Trocchio wasn't very hard to take. After that, we switched north of Highway number 6, below La Pastorella, and went across the country to San Michele.
Yes.
We turned left here and crossed the Purple Heart Valley and Rapido River on our way to the mountains. Here we had a peace treaty, gathering the dead and wounded from both sides. We passed the 168th Infantry and pushed on up the hill to Mount Castellone.
Montecassino.
Okay, Mount Castellone. February the 6th, we crossed Hill 593, which overlooks Montecassino Abbey, but was separated by a deep gorge, and on February the 8th, part of us were at the Benedictine Abbey of Montecassino. The days in combat can never be explained. We moved very slow and under heavy opposition. Casualties on both sides were heavy. The stench of decaying mules, litter of overturned vehicles, disabled tanks, and the dead will not be or cannot be forgotten by those who saw it.
That's a picture of Duan Bullard in the area where his father was wounded on the 8th February 1944.
About dawn, I was wounded. It happened about 100 yards from the door of the Montecassino Abbey. I was picked up and carried to the field hospital unconscious. From there, they carried me to General Hospital on February the 29th. There I made quite a few friends, including Albert Flores and Joseph Michalowski. I had Charles Leach of Northfield, Massachusetts, paint some pictures of scenes from our hospital window. The hospital was a 3-story and basement structure made in the form of a square with a park and recreation grounds in the center. It was formerly a hotel, and before the Americans turned it into a hospital, it had been used as a prison camp. It was located on the outskirts of Caserta. I remained here until April the 21st, when they told us we were to go to Naples. After saying farewell to nurses and friends, we went to Naples and boarded ship about 10 o'clock in the morning and sailed about dusk. It took us about 7 days to get to Oran. Some of us were to stay in Oran for reconditioning and preparing for our return to combat. We had no way of knowing who would go and who would stay, so we really had to sweat it out until we really knew we were on our way home. We landed in the States at Charleston, South Carolina on May the 7th, 1944. We ate dinner there, went back to our barracks, and called home to our families. The following week, all we had to do was eat and sleep. We also were awarded our Purple Hearts.
That's Herman receiving his Purple Heart. Now please listen to the following words written by a British veteran. His name is Fred Magellani, veteran of the Battle of Montecassino. He was awarded a military cross, and after the war he became a journalist and wrote a book about the battle, and he had only words of praise for the 34th Division. The performance of the 34th Division at Cassino must rank with the finest feats of arms carried out by any soldiers during the war. When at last they were relieved by the 4th Indian Division, 50 of those few who had held on the last were too numbed with cold and exhaustion to move. They could still mend their positions, but they could not move out of them unaided. They were carried out of stretchers, and it was one of the final cruelties of this battle that some of them, having survived so much, were killed on their stretchers by shell fire on the long way down to safety. They had earned the praise which for soldiers is the best to receive, that of other soldiers who have moved in to relieve them, and who alone can see at first hand what they have done, what they have endured. It was the British and Indian soldiers of the 4th Indian Divisions moving in to relieve them who proclaimed the achievement of the Americans the loudest. His son Duan gave me the information of what happened to his dad after the war. He said, after the war, my daddy was pretty in bad shape. He was paralyzed from the waist down and spent almost 9 months in Hot Spring, in Arkansas, in rehabilitation. They would put him in ice for a period of time and would then be placed in the hot spring, water under 10 degrees, trying to get his leg nerves to respond. After the time spent in rehab, he and my mum went back to Yucca to begin a life. Mum took care of Dad and the problems that he had from his emotional experiences during the war. My dad was discharged with 100% disability due to the fact that he had contracted multiple sclerosis and given 1 year in which they projected he would die. During this time, my uncle, Dr. Leroy Braxton, was treating my dad. For whatever reasons, God gave my dad a reprieve by allowing his multiple sclerosis to go into remission. He had problems with his nerves the rest of his life, but the disease did not kill him. About a year after, Dad came back from rehab in Arkansas and became aware of a program called World War II GI Bill that would pay for my dad to go to a school to learn a trade to help support he and Mum. They moved to Prairie and lived in a dormitory with other GIs and families to begin a year-long program to study cabinet making. While there, he coached and sponsored teams in baseball and basketball that went all the way to the National Independence League championship in Kansas. My mom and dad said those were some of the best times in their life. They were very close to the families they lived with and played with, and kept those acquaintances they gained for the rest of their lives. Family did not have any money then, but they pooled their monies together and ate together to make it through the year. Friendships were all that was required during their time in training. Dad completed his training and came back to Yucca, where he worked in the field of cabinet making for the rest of his life. He was never able to work full time, but was respected as the best in his fields for more than 40 years. My mom was an accomplished artist, and between the two of them, they created some quality artifacts that my family still love and enjoy today. My mom has more than 400 oil paintings throughout the US, and they are of great quality and importance. I have about 40 of those paintings, and my brothers have about 20 each. So next time you hear the words the cost of freedom, you know the meaning. It's not an abstract idea. It's very personal. It's about Worth, it's about Sly, it's about Herman, it's about Earl, it's about Reginald, it's about the thousands of men that gave their lives for our freedom, and the least we can do is to remember their sacrifice and honor them. A few months earlier, I had met the son of another Red Buller, same regiment of Herman, and wounded in Montecassino a few days later. I met his son, John Case, and he told me that his father was a surgeon in Company A, under 5th Infantry Regiment of the 34th Division. He completed basic training at Camp Shelby, Mississippi in September 43, attaining the rank of corporal. He went home on leave and then crossed the Atlantic in October 1943 and wound up in North Africa for additional training prior to the deployment to Italy. He joined the 34th Infantry Division near San Vittore on 8 January 1944, where he was promoted to sergeant. Fought at Monte Trocchio, moved forward to the Rapido River to conduct patrols, and then launched the first attack on the town of Cassino on the 27th January 1944. On the 29th, his battalion was relieved and moved to San Michele in preparation for the Battle of Montecassino. From the 1st to the 3rd February, his battalion attacked the high ground to the left of Hill 382 and occupied Hill 324. On the 4th February, his battalion continued the attack to the Abbey and advanced on Hill 445, which is very close, about 500 meters from the Abbey of Montecassino. They attacked the Abbey on the 5th February and failed. They were then shifted northwest to prepare to attack Hill 593 on the 6th February. They were shifted further northwest on the 7th February to support by fire the under 68 regiments and the under 41st Regiment of the 36th Texas Division attacking Hill 593. On the 11th February, my father was wounded and evacuated to the General Hospital in Naples. On 13 and 14 February, British troops of the 4th Indian Division relieved the 34th Infantry Division, and the 34 was pulled back from the front line. The last story of today, it's about First Lieutenant Robert W. Goss. I met his three daughters in 2012. One of them, Sharon, the eldest, contacted me, and because she wanted to do a battlefield tours in Montecassino, but also was for them the first time in Rome, and we did a Vatican Museum tour. I remember that I met them in their hotel just very close to the Termini station, and so we spent a beautiful day in Rome, and then we went to Cassino for the battlefields. Like many other veterans, Robert didn't want to talk about the war. He never spoke about his experience to the family. So all we can do is actually we can read the military records and try to understand what happened to him. From the war record, we know that Robert enlisted in the army in 1941. He went to several schools, one for anti-aircraft artillery, one for demolition. He became a glider pilot, paratrooper, and was stationed at the U.S. Army Air Base in Alliance, Nebraska. That is where he met his future wife. They married in October 1943, and then, after 1 month, he was shipped out overseas for the war. Here is a picture of Bob in Cassino. He's spreading out food to Italians. There you can clearly see how they were desperate. Italy, for political decision, especially after the change of side, was abandoned to a dramatic destiny. The people were not rich before, but they had dignity and food. And as we surrendered with the occupation of Italy, it was a disaster, and the people starved. went from poverty to starvation, and the starvation didn't last 1 or 2 months. It lasted years before Italy recovered. My gratitude and devotion to your dead, Sharon, for what you did for my people in those terrible moments. Thank you from the bottom of my heart. From his records, we know that Robert was hospitalized with anxiety, tremors, insomnia, nightmares. It was not called post traumatic stress, it was called battle fatigue. And he was not talked about ever. Sharon said his dad never said anything about it, but in her mind there's no doubt that he felt bad and weak for suffering battle fatigue. Today he would be considered a hero, and even more than a hero if he would have only talked about it, said Sharon. But in my mind, Sharon, your dad is a hero. We don't need a story to tell that. Sharon said that the only member of the family his father talked to about some of the experience of the war is her sister's husband, Michael. So while they were fishing, Robert told Michael that he was a leader of the commando platoon that went behind enemy lines and did whatever they had to do. He mentioned this because the things that he did bothered him his entire life. He did not share specifics, just as he worked behind enemy's line. Sharon noted on his separation qualification record there is a sentence under the title Infantry Unit Commander, led commando platoon in combat. I know from his record, said Sharon, that he was a demolition and explosives expert, so I believe the veracity of the stories. I can also understand, she said, while this activity would bother him greatly. German was spoken at home, and he knew his family was a German descendant. In addition, he was a strong but not practicing Catholic, and Sharon is still in possession of his rosaries and soldiers' prayer book. It's very interesting what Sharon said about her dad. There were many American Germans descendants fighting in Italy and in Europe. For many of them was the first time in Europe, in Italy, and they had in their imagination seen the Germans all the same, all Nazis. So when they were in contact with the Germans in Italy, for example, they realized that they were very similar to them. They saw in their eyes a person similar, with the same culture, the same background. So they changed their opinion. And that's written on the Matthew Parker book about the Battle of Montecassino. So the enemy remained, the vicious enemy remained the Japanese, but they changed their opinion about the Germans. Many thanks to Sharon for sharing her family history with us. And thank you, Robert, for your sacrifice. You will be remembered.